Hello everyone, today is Friday the 26th of March 2021. Welcome to my channel here, and I wanted to do a follow-up on the Shamash explanation that I gave about Malachi 4:2, because I want you to see why I do think it's the son rather than, the S-U-N in Shemesh, rather than a son, which would be Bane, or even a servant or a minister, which would be something like Shamash, possibly. But I'm going to show you today another reason why I think it's the son. That's the first thing we're going to do. And the second thing we're going to do is I saw a tweet where a follower pointed out, she said Isaiah 54, but she meant Isaiah 53, about where it talks about Jesus having done no violence. And I want to show you what that could also possibly mean, because we know that, of course, he did do some violence at least one time that's recorded, and that was in the temple when he beat the money changers and overturned their tables. That's pretty violent. To say he did no violence wouldn't be a really correct translation, considering the trial that was going on and what they were accusing him of. So that's what we're doing here today, and I hope that it further clarifies some things. Let me show you some of the books that I've got. Of course, I've got a Bible. I've also got an interlinear Hebrew, Greek, and English Bible. Okay, I've talked to you about that before. I've showed you that it's written in the original Hebrew, not original Hebrew, but the Hebrew of the first century BC, etc., and first century AD. Actually, they continue to use Hebrew, and we can prove that by the way certain things are written in the New Testament. They were still using Hebrew. Even Paul said that he was speaking and writing in the Hebrew language. But at any rate, I don't really want to get there today, but it's very likely. As a matter of fact, it's almost unlikely that they wrote the original New Testament in Greek. They probably wrote it in Hebrew, not even Aramaic, but probably Hebrew, and then it was translated into Greek. And there are reasons that we can talk about that using textual criticism and some other things. But again, I don't want to get there today. Let me show you a couple other books. I talked about it quite a bit. The Gesenius, Hebrew lexicon of the Old Testament, very important for looking up words. And then, of course, Strong's Concordance. And I told you I had these paperbacks. I don't always use my really nice books, but when I travel, I try to remember to bring these paperbacks with me. What happens is you're reading in the Hebrew interlinear Bible, and it'll give Strong's number there. And of course, if you're reading in the King James, what you do is you look it up, the word that you want to know in the Strong's. And there are others, as I mentioned before. There's Brown, Driver, and Briggs as well. But I prefer to stick with Strong's for a number of reasons. So I do. And so you look up the word. Let's say you want to look up the word daughter. You look it up in the Strong's. It'll give you the Hebrew word and the number in the lexicon, so you can look it up and see all the different meanings. And then if you, well, not all of them, but a good number of them. If you want more information, that's when you go to the Gesenius, and you can basically dissect the word even more and get a better distillation of the meaning. Okay, so I wanted to show you those so that you know that I do have those with me. And let's start off, and I do have to use the print in the Hebrew Linear Bible is very small, so I usually do have to use glasses if I'm going to read that, so they are here with me in case I need it. Okay, let's look at the board. I'm going to compare Malachi 4:2. Let's read that so that you'll remember what it is that we're talking about. It's the last book in the Old Testament, and this is what it says in 4:2. And if you look in the Interlinear Bible, or any Bible like that, where the Hebrew is there, there is no chapter 4 in Malachi. It just continues with chapter 3, and the verses continue on. But we'll use the King James Version. Let me read this to you here again. I suggest you read the entire chapter, but let's read the subject that we're concerned with here. It's in verse 2. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves in the stall. Again, there are reasons just in this chapter that I explain why I think it's the Son in the sky and not Jesus or a servant minister, as we're going to talk about here in a minute, and I'll show you that. So that's the verse that we're talking about. Now, when you look at Malachi 4:2, the word that's used for son is Shamash, and I've talked about this before. Shin, Mem, Shin, Shemesh. You hear those vowels. I talked about it before. I won't spend much time on it. If it was talking about a servant or a minister, it would be Shamash. Okay, and I told you about the difference in the vowels there, right? Shemesh for son, Shamash for minister or servant. So, could it be Shamash? Well, Malachi isn't dumb, okay? He would have known about Isaiah. And Isaiah 53:11 uses an entirely different word. Now, if Malachi had wanted it to mean a servant in the sense of a person, or even Jesus, he most likely would have quoted Isaiah. And that's why I'm going to go to Isaiah 53:11. Let's read that, and I'll do it out of the King James, but you get a whole nother idea about this when you read it in the Hebrew Linear Bible, and I've got it here if we need it. But let me just read Isaiah 53:11 to you. And this is what it says. He shall see the travail of his soul and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteousness, or my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. The word for servant there, remember we're saying, is it Shamash? Could the Shemesh in Malachi 4:2 actually be Shamash, a servant or minister? Well, again, Malachi would have known about Isaiah 53:11, and the word that's used in Isaiah 53:11 in the Hebrew is Abedi. That means my. The Y sound on the end, the yod, means it's a possessive. It means my. This means my servant, basically. And this is Ayin Beit Dalet. Abed. So it would make sense if Malachi wanted to ensure, certainly knowing that there's Shemesh and Shamash, for instance, or if he's using some other prophetic type of tool here, which I don't think so. And he wanted to make sure that people understood that he was talking about the same person or idea that was in Isaiah 53:11. He would have used the word Abedi, or Abed. So it would have been the righteous servant wouldn't be Shamash. It would be Abed. The servant would be Abed, because that's the way it's written in Isaiah 53:11, which most people, myself included, believe is a messianic text. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to say. Notice the words that I've got down here, so you can go look this up for yourself. Shamash, if you're talking about a servant, it's word 8120 in the Strong's Hebrew side. If you're talking about Shemesh, son, it's word 8121 in the Hebrew side, okay? And if you want to look at the other word that's in Isaiah 53:11, Abed, okay, it's word 5650. So you'll be able to see that when you see how Isaiah frames this righteous servant, it would make sense that if Malachi wanted to give that sense, he would have used the same language, in other words, Abed, that Isaiah did, instead of Shemesh, which means son, of course, and that's the idea, it's the sun in the sky, rather than Shamash. Okay, so I thought, or he could be doing a double meaning, and I admit that. The prophets sometimes would use a wordplay like that to mean that it could be both. Okay, so when Malachi said this, admittedly, he could also be saying, not only is it the sun in the sky, okay, but it is this servant of righteousness. It can mean both. You see, that is a possibility in the prophetic method. But because of some other issues, I still consider it to be the Shamash, the son. Hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about there. I want you to go look it up for yourselves. If you have a Strong's and a Gesenius or a Hebrew linear Bible, it would be a good idea. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is this question that this lady brought up. She quoted Isaiah 53:9 because of some things that I had been saying on Twitter. Let me read Isaiah 53:9 to you, okay? I'll start at verse 8. It says, again, I'm in Isaiah 53. I'm going to start verse 8 and read through verse 9. He was taken from prison and judgment, and who shall declare his generation? That's very critical in understanding who this person is, okay? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. Interesting. Now verse 9, which she brought up. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. The idea that I think this person was trying to show is that Jesus was basically a very, he was a real lamb. He was not given to any kind of anger or violence. Okay, very passive, that type of thing. And as I said at the beginning of this, we already know that's not true because he overturned the tables, so and whipped the money changers, which certainly is a violence. So what I suggest is that in the context of Isaiah 53 here, they're talking about him being unjustly accused. Basically, and we know that from the New Testament, that they made up things against him. Certainly the situation in the temple was violent, and they may have said he did this violence in the temple. So to say that he did no violence wouldn't fit the context. So look up the word violence in the Strong's. It's word 2555. Now this is in the Hebrew, not in the Greek. So it makes sense here. So we're just in the Hebrew. The word is komase. Komase. And what it means, it can mean violence, but it also means a wrong. He didn't sin, okay? So this could say, because he had done no sin, no wrong. Unjust gain. He had never done any unjust gain. Injustice. He had never done an injustice. Or false. He had never done anything false. So, considering just the one situation at the temple where he used violence, the word violence in Isaiah here is probably not the best choice of words when it was translated from the Hebrew into the English. I have not looked at the Septuagint or any of the others, but I think from the context of what this says about this righteous servant in Isaiah, it's obvious that he had done no violence is the wrong word to translate kalmase from. It should actually be injustice, a wrong, falsehood, unjust gain, those types of things. So let me read verse 9 again the way I think it should be done. And I think most people would agree when they look at this that that's the case. Verse 9, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no injustice rather than violence. He had done no wrong. Remember, Pilate said, I find nothing wrong with this man. I find no unlawfulness in this man. Okay. It really fits, okay, under the circumstances. So I'm going to stick with that translation. The word is not violence, okay, that it shouldn't be translated as violence in Isaiah 53, verse 9. And again, that number you can look up in Strong's, or you can go to the Gesenius too, but in Strong's it's 2555. And if you know how to use the Gesenius, you can go look up this word and you'll see all the other meanings and why I say what I say here. And we could go into a lot more depth, but I think that pretty much explains it, okay? So there we are. Again, recapping this, I think Malachi 4:2 is definitely talking about Shamash, the sun in the sky, not Shamash, a servant, because if he had done that, he probably would have used the same word for righteous servant that Isaiah did in Isaiah 53:11, which would be Abed, and he did not use that. The only other possible reason for him using this, it could be a double play on words to say it's both the son and a righteous servant, that they will do the same things, because certainly the son would be subject to Jesus's power, okay? So it could be a play on words, but I'm going to stick with Shamash for right now because, as I said before, you know, the sun stood still in the sky for Joshua, and they talk about the sun being darkened and the moon turned to blood. So I just wanted to cover that real quick today and let you know about it. I decided I'm trying to use my lights with a white balance, so I'm a little better. And you might wonder why I use this background. When I do my religious studies, I like to kind of, you know, make it a little more, you know, in the concept, in the idea of the time, you know, that kind of a thing. Kind of historical. It's not really Hebraic, but it's about the closest thing I've got. So it provides an ambiance for that, I guess, is the reason why I do it. All right. So I just wanted to cover that. Let's talk about one other thing, if you don't mind. I'll do it from over here. So if you want to copy some of this down, you can. As I mentioned in my video where I talked about they're planting landmines everywhere, things are getting very serious. Buttigieg, of course, is now saying they want to tax people by the mile. They want to keep track of you. See if you go to a gas pump and pay taxes just at the gas pump, they really still don't know where you're going. I mean, they can track you if you're using a credit card or whatever, but they don't want that. Of course, cash is going away. And they say, of course, there are all these different modes of transportation now, you know, electric cars and all that. Well, they could impose taxes on the electric recharging stations. They could do that. But they probably won't do that because they want to be able to track you where you're going. And they want also, which they could do anyway, but I'm talking about by having to file. I don't know how they're going to roll this out, but it's probably going to be some way along in the 1040 reporting system for the IRS. There'll probably be something there. What was your last mileage last year as compared to this year? And then they'll tack on a tax. So they want to make you report to the system. Very bad, very dangerous. We've gone too far down this road already, but considering who's pushing the show now, it wouldn't be a bit surprising. Of course, and then there's the gun thing. Biden's saying he's going to do executive orders, and Trump, crazily enough, used an executive order to ban a bump stock. As you all know, I was very much against that, and I was really surprised that there wasn't more of a kickback on it. But at any rate, I heard today, I haven't verified it, maybe some of you can, that the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals said that the bump stock ban was unconstitutional because it was an executive order. So hopefully that'll keep Biden from moving forward on this stuff, but we can't trust the courts. And you all should know that. The idea of judicial supremacy is outrageous. And as far as your 10 amendments are concerned, there should be absolutely no power over those 10 amendments, even by the courts. But, you know, we're so far down the road to tyranny and authoritarianism, in fact, communism now, that we have to expect that these things are going to continue. And of course, you also know that they're pushing forward on the genetically modifying jabs. And that's, of course, very bad news. There's some headway on getting rid of many of the other restrictions in quite a number of states. But that one, everybody, including DeSantis, is pushing, which I consider to be evil, actually, and showing that they're still on board with this overall program. Okay, that's all I've got for you tonight. Hopefully it will clarify another thing. I could have brought all this out in my last presentation on Malachi 4:2, but I wanted you to have some time to let it percolate and maybe take some time to look at it for yourselves. And then I wanted to throw you this additional curve of, it would seem to me that he would have used the phraseology and the actual words in Isaiah rather than using the word Shamash. But again, the prophetic method, it could be that he's saying both, and I'll give that to you. Could be both, as I just said. It could be Shemesh the son, and in addition to it, a servant or minister of righteousness, Shamash, which of course could control the son with the power of God. All right, that's all I got for you today. Hope that was interesting. We'll talk to you again later out here.